The moment Aisha realized she was pregnant, her heart swelled with a strange mixture of fear and hope. She had always dreamed of a happy family, but reality crashed down like a thunderstorm. When she told her parents, hoping for support, their faces twisted with disappointment, anger, and judgment. "You've ruined everything," her mother shrieked, tears threatening to spill but restrained by anger. "Do you know what this means? You've destroyed your life, your reputation, and our family's name." Her father's silence was worse than her mother's words. The sharp look in his eyes made Aisha's knees weak. She had expected scolding, yes, but not total rejection. "Leave," he finally said, his voice cold and final. "We cannot have someone like you here. Not like this." Aisha left, her small suitcase in hand, tears blurring the streetlights as she walked aimlessly. The city felt enormous and hostile, like it too was rejecting her. Every shadow whispered danger. Every passerby's glance felt like judgment. She was alone now, with a secret growing inside her, one that she didn't fully understand yet. But fate has a strange way of intervening. On a quiet, rain-slicked night, as she curled up on a park bench, shivering from both the cold and despair, a man approached. His presence was commanding, almost frightening, yet strangely comforting. "You're not as alone as you think," he said, his voice deep and calm. There was something in his eyes, a storm of power and secrets that made her shiver with both fear and curiosity. Aisha didn't know it yet, but this encounter would change everything. The tiny life growing inside her was not ordinary. It belonged to someone she could never have imagined. Someone whose power and influence would reach into the darkest corners of her world, and whose enemies would stop at nothing to harm her. Days after Aisha left her home were a blur of fear, loneliness, and whispered doubts. She rented a tiny, dim apartment on the edge of the city, barely big enough for herself and the life growing inside her. Nights were the hardest. The silence of the room felt heavy, suffocating, pressing against her chest like an invisible hand. She tried to distract herself with small tasks, cooking, cleaning, even reading old books, but nothing could fill the emptiness. She felt the baby kick for the first time, a sharp, startling reminder that she was no longer alone. Her heart swelled with love, but also with terror. How could she protect this tiny being when she herself was so vulnerable? Then came the strange events, small, almost imperceptible at first. A shadow lingering too long outside her window, a whisper of footsteps in the hallway when she knew she was alone. Her phone would light up with unknown numbers calling in the dead of night. Only silence on the other end. And one night, as she sat on her bed staring at the ceiling, she heard it. A low, almost growling voice speaking her name. Aisha. Her breath caught. She spun around, but the apartment was empty. Her heart pounded in her ears. Was it imagination? Fear makes the mind play tricks, she told herself. Days later, while rummaging through old baby clothes, she found a letter tucked between them. It wasn't addressed to her, yet the handwriting was elegant, commanding, almost regal. Protect the child at all costs. The world will try to take what belongs to him. Trust no one. Aisha's hands trembled. How could someone know? Who was watching her? The thought of the man in the park returned. Was he connected? Was he somehow involved with the child she carried? The idea gave her a strange sense of relief. Perhaps she wasn't entirely defenseless. She realized she was no longer living in the world she had known. Every step could pull her closer to people who wanted her child, or worse, people who wanted her out of the way entirely. In the dead of night, when the wind howled against her window, she made a silent vow. I will survive, no matter what it takes. Little did she know, the hidden secret was far bigger than she could imagine. Her child wasn't just a baby. He was the heir to power, danger, and enemies she could not even begin to comprehend. When the world realized his existence, nothing would ever be the same. Aisha tried to live quietly, but the city revealed secrets she wasn't ready to face. A knock at her door when she hadn't expected anyone. A package left outside, unmarked, containing only a single black feather. At first, she laughed nervously, calling it coincidence. At the market, an old vendor lowered his voice when she approached. Be careful, miss. The Alpha knows. Aisha froze. The Alpha? She asked, forcing a casual tone. The man's eyes darted nervously. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have the child. He's powerful. And the wrong people, they're already looking. At night, the wind seemed to whisper through her small apartment, carrying a presence she could feel before she could see. No knock, no call. Only a deep, primal sense of being watched. She shivered, pulling the blanket tighter, curiosity gnawing at her fear. She whispered to herself, I have to know, rocking gently, feeling the child move inside her. Then a vision came. A massive figure, tall and commanding, eyes burning like fire, speaking not to her, but to the child. You are mine. No one will take you from me. Aisha woke drenched in sweat. The room was silent, but her heart raced with fear and awe. Who was he? Why did the vision feel real? The next day, fragments of information surfaced. Men in suits arguing about the heir and protecting the lineage. She realized she stood in the middle of something ancient and dangerous. With fear came a magnetic curiosity she couldn't resist. Whoever the Alpha was, he wasn't just a shadow. He was real. And if he truly claimed her child, perhaps the protective instincts she felt weren't just maternal. They were part of a power she could neither deny nor understand. That night, a low growl echoed through the walls of her apartment. It wasn't outside, it was inside her mind. A whisper, a warning, perhaps a promise. You are not alone. Protect him. Survive. She wondered what scared her more, the unknown figure or the destiny of her child. The city at night had a different rhythm. Lights flickered like distant stars, casting long shadows across narrow streets. Aisha wandered aimlessly, haunted by visions, whispers, and warnings of the Alpha. Each step felt heavier as the weight of the unknown pressed down on her shoulders. She barely noticed the drizzle until she realized someone was following her. A figure, a man, kept just far enough to remain unseen, yet close enough that Aisha's instincts screamed danger. She tried to shake him off, darting through crowded streets, hiding in alleys, even slipping into a small store. No matter where she went, he remained, silent, patient, observing. In a deserted square, panting and soaked to the bone, the man approached. His steps were slow, deliberate, unnervingly confident. He stopped a few feet away, the hood of his coat hiding his face in shadow. You're running, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of authority that made Aisha freeze. I don't know you, she stammered, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to steady her shaking hands. "Why are you following me?" The man lifted his hood just enough to reveal piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Because you are important, and right now, you are in danger you cannot even comprehend." Aisha's mind raced. Was this the same mysterious figure from her dream? Could it be connected to the Alpha? "Important, dangerous. What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled, both from fear and cold. He took a step closer, careful not to startle her further. "You are carrying something that belongs to someone far more powerful than you or anyone else. That child, he is the heir, and there are those who would kill to claim him." Her stomach dropped. "The heir? What do you mean? He's just a baby." He shook his head slowly. "Not just a baby. He carries a legacy that could change the balance of power. You have no idea the forces that are already moving against him. Against you." End quote. Aisha wanted to turn and run, but something in his presence rooted her to the spot. There was a strange gravity, a dangerous authority she could neither ignore nor fully understand. "I can help you," he continued. "Protection, knowledge, guidance, but it comes at a cost. You must trust me completely, without hesitation, and follow my instructions to the letter." "Why would I trust you?" Aisha asked sharply, trying to mask the fear that made her voice shake. "You could be one of them, one of the people who want to take my child." He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "I am not your enemy. But enemies are everywhere, hiding in plain sight. You have no idea who to trust, Aisha. I can give you the tools to survive and to keep your child alive." Her mind raced, weighing options. She was desperate, terrified, and alone. Yet something about the man's presence, his knowledge, his certainty, gave her a sliver of hope. Could she risk it? Could she trust someone she barely knew? Someone who could be a stranger or a savior? Before she could answer, a sudden noise erupted from the shadows behind her. Footsteps, heavier, faster, closing in. Aisha turned, and her breath caught. Figures emerged from the darkness. Two men, their faces obscured by hoods, moving with deadly precision. "Move!" the stranger shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind a row of parked cars. The men advanced, their intentions clear. Aisha's heart pounded in terror and adrenaline. She had no weapon, no plan, nothing but the stranger holding her hand and the faint promise of protection he offered. "You have to trust me," he hissed, his eyes scanning the street. "If they get to you, they'll take the child. Now run when I say." The seconds stretched unbearably. Every instinct in her screamed to flee, but the stranger's presence was a strange anchor, a lifeline she couldn't ignore. Then, with a sudden movement, he darted forward, creating a distraction, forcing the attackers to hesitate just long enough. "Go! Go now!" he shouted. Aisha ran blindly, heart pounding, tears streaming down her face, but a strange clarity emerged in her mind. She was not helpless. She was not entirely alone, and perhaps, just perhaps, she could survive this storm. Later, safe in a dim, hidden room the stranger had led her to, she sat trembling, holding her stomach. The rain still pattered against the window, but inside, the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. "You've seen a glimpse," the stranger said quietly, standing in the corner, watching her like a guardian. "There are forces you don't understand yet, but I will teach you to protect him, to protect yourself. There will be danger, betrayal, and darkness, but survival is possible." Aisha looked at him, her mind a whirlwind of questions, fear, and reluctant hope. "Oh, who are you?" she whispered. He met her gaze steadily, and for the first time, she felt the weight of his presence, not threatening, but commanding, like a force of nature. "I am someone who knows the Alpha, and someone who knows the world he inhabits. You don't understand now, but you will. And Aisha, you have no idea what you are carrying, but one day the world will kneel before him." Her chest tightened, fear and awe battling inside her. She didn't fully understand, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same. The moment she accepted his offer, her life and her child's life was no longer her own. The darkness outside pressed against the window, reminding her that danger was never far. And in that darkness, the whisper of fate promised that the world was already moving against them, and the first battle had only just begun. The world Aisha thought she knew was gone. Her days had become a tense rhythm of shadows, whispers, and careful observation. Every knock on her door, every stranger in the street made her pulse race. Yet, nothing had prepared her for what came next. It was late in the evening when the stranger from the park and the alley appeared at her door once more. This time, there was no urgency in his approach, no frantic whispering. Instead, a calm authority radiated from him, something that made the air itself feel heavier, charged with unspoken power. "Aisha," he said quietly, almost reverently, "he is here. He wants to meet you and your child." Aisha's breath caught. Her heart raced like a wild drum in her chest. What do you mean? Who is here?" The stranger hesitated. "The Alpha, the one your child belongs to. He has been watching, waiting, but now he will step forward." When he finally arrived, the night itself seemed to bend around him. He appeared silently, emerging from the shadows, a towering figure with an aura of command that demanded attention. Every step he took felt deliberate, measured, like a predator surveying its territory. His eyes, piercing and intense, seemed to look straight into her soul, reading every fear, every doubt, every secret she had tried to hide. "You are Aisha," he said, his voice deep, resonant, carrying a power that made the very air tremble. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling despite herself. She wanted to run, to hide, but something stronger than fear rooted her to the spot. "And this," he continued, his gaze softening just slightly as it shifted to the small curve of her belly, "is my child." Aisha froze. His words, calm and definitive, hit her like a thunderclap. "Yours? But how? Her voice faltered, questions tumbling over each other, unable to form coherent sentences. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. There was no threat in his movements, only an intensity she could barely comprehend. "You do not yet understand the life you carry. The child you protect is not ordinary. He is the heir, born to a legacy of power, of command, of responsibility. And there are those who would take him before he even has a chance to grow." Aisha's heart pounded. The weight of his words pressed on her chest. She had been living in a shadowed reality, running, hiding, terrified, and all the while, her child had been at the center of something enormous, something dangerous beyond imagination. "You've been alone," he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers, "but no longer. I will ensure your safety, but you must trust me completely. There is no room for doubt, hesitation, or betrayal." I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice breaking. The thought of trusting anyone after all she had endured terrified her, and yet something in his presence called to her, pulling her toward a safety she had never known. He notes slightly, lowering himself to her level, as if to lessen the sheer force of his presence. You are not just protecting a child, Aisha. You are protecting the future, and you must be strong, stronger than anyone can imagine. The weight of his gaze was almost unbearable. Yet beneath the command, beneath the raw intensity, she sensed something else, a careful, restrained tenderness, as if he already knew the bond they would share with the child. The stranger who had guided her until now stepped back, nodding respectfully. He will instruct you. Follow him. Aisha's mind was a whirlwind. Danger, power, and responsibility collided with awe, fear, and reluctant hope. She wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, but her voice faltered. And then, in a moment that froze time itself, she felt it. A tiny kick from her child, as if the baby recognized the presence of his father, the Alpha, the one who had been silently shaping the world around them all along. The Alpha observed her quietly, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He is strong, he said softly, almost to himself, and so will you be because of him. For the first time since her parents had rejected her, since the world had seemed so impossibly cruel and unforgiving, Aisha felt a strange surge of determination. She was no longer just a scared, abandoned young woman. She was a mother, and now she was part of something far larger, far more dangerous, and far more extraordinary than she could have ever imagined. But with the Alpha revealed came a chilling realization. Knowing who her child belonged to also meant that their enemies would now know. The shadows lurking in every corner, the whispers she had heard, the attacks that had already begun, they were only the beginning. And the storm she was about to face would test her in ways she could not yet comprehend. As she stared into the Alpha's piercing eyes, a silent vow formed in her mind. I will protect him, no matter the cost, no matter the danger, no matter the darkness. And in the quiet, charged air of that night, the first threads of a bond, powerful, unbreakable, and full of suspense, began to form between mother, child, and Alpha. The world outside had no idea the force it was about to face. Aisha had begun to feel a fragile sense of security after meeting the Alpha, a strange mix of awe, fear, and cautious hope settling over her like a thin shield. But that shield, she would soon discover, was fragile, shattered easily by the hidden dangers that lurked just beyond her vision. The city, once familiar in its chaotic rhythms, now felt like a predator stalking its prey. Shadows were deeper, noises sharper, and every glance over her shoulder carried a whisper of menace. Even the small apartment she had thought safe now felt like a trap, walls closing in, windows like eyes observing her every move. It started subtly, doors left slightly ajar, misplaced items, the faintest scratches on the floor. At first, she dismissed them as paranoia, a side effect of exhaustion and fear. But the warnings were mounting, and soon she could no longer ignore. One evening, as she settled into bed, rocking the child gently, a muffled crash echoed from the apartment next door. Her heart jolted. She froze, listening intently. There was a pattern to the noise, almost deliberate, something moving, searching, waiting. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay calm, to observe, to survive. The Alpha had trained her well in the past few days. Lessons of awareness, instinct and caution. She remembered his words. You will sense danger before it touches you. You will feel it in your bones. And now, her instincts screamed at her. Danger was here. She grabbed the small, concealed dagger he had given her, a simple blade, but heavier with promise and protection, and crept to the door. Every step was deliberate, silent, her senses tuned to every sound. The hallway was empty. A shadow flickered at the far end, and for a moment, Aisha froze, holding her breath, heartbeat hammering in her ears. Then came the whisper of a voice, low and threatening, carrying a familiarity she could not place. You cannot hide forever. Aisha's blood ran cold. She had been followed, spied upon, watched by someone who knew more than they should. Someone dangerous, someone who wanted her or the child, or both. The next morning, the stranger who had guided her arrived with urgent news. They are closer than you think, he said, his expression grim. These are not ordinary criminals. They are organized, patient, and ruthless. They will stop at nothing to claim what belongs to the Alpha. Who are they? Aisha asked, fear twisting her stomach into knots. They call themselves the Shadows. They operate in secrecy, and they have already infiltrated areas you consider safe. Their reach is long, their intelligence vast. They will come for the child, and they will come for you. Aisha's mind reeled. The world she had stumbled into was far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Every step she took, every breath she drew, was now measured against a threat she could neither see nor fully understand. And yet, amidst the fear, a strange resolve began to grow. She could not run forever. She had to fight for herself, for her child, for the future she had not yet fully glimpsed. Days blurred into nights as she took precautions. The apartment was reinforced, every window and door secured. Routes were memorized, escape plans formulated. The stranger trained her relentlessly in awareness, evasion, and defense. She learned to read the shadows, to feel the presence of others, and to trust instincts she had never known she possessed. And then, one night, it happened. A figure broke into the apartment, silent, precise, like a predator stalking prey. Aisha, alerted by the faintest creak, spun, dagger in hand, heart racing. The intruder froze for a moment, eyes narrowing at the sight of her. Then, with terrifying speed, they moved, and a struggle erupted. The small apartment became a battleground, a child crying in terror as Aisha fought with every ounce of strength and instinct she had learned. Her hands were steady, her movements deliberate, fueled by fear and determination. She disarmed the intruder, forcing them back, her dagger at their throat. "Stay away from him," she hissed, her voice low but unwavering. The intruder's eyes gleamed with a dangerous combination of fear and malice. "You can't protect him forever," they spat before fleeing into the night, disappearing as silently as they had come. Aisha sank to the floor, chest heaving, tears of fear and relief mingling. The danger was real. The world was closing in. But one truth remained. She would fight. She would survive, and she would protect her child no matter the cost. The shadows outside whispered constantly, but within her, a spark of determination burned brighter than ever. The Alpha had revealed himself. The enemies had shown their hand, and Aisha was no longer a passive victim. She was a mother, a protector, and someone who would face the lurking danger head-on. Yet, deep down, a question lingered, gnawing at her sanity. How far would they go? How many forces had already aligned against her? And when the real attack comes, will she and the child be ready? A storm was coming, and Aisha, for the first time, realized that survival would demand more than courage. It would demand cunning, strength, and sacrifices she had never imagined. The days that followed the intrusion were tense, each moment a delicate balance between vigilance and exhaustion. Aisha could no longer remember what it felt like to relax, even for a second. Her nights were punctuated by the baby's cries and the distant echoes of footsteps she swore she heard in the hallways. Every shadow became a potential threat, every stranger a possible enemy. Yet, amidst the tension, there were moments of fragile connection. The Alpha had begun teaching her more than just survival. He had begun guiding her through the subtle intricacies of power, influence, and protection. With him, she learned to anticipate danger before it arrived, to read the intentions behind a glance, a movement, or even silence. But trust remained elusive. One evening, as Aisha prepared a modest dinner in her hidden apartment, there was a knock at the door. She froze, every instinct screaming caution. The Alpha was out on matters he had not disclosed, leaving her alone with the child. Her hands gripped the counter, knuckles white, heart hammering. "Who is it?" she called, her voice steady despite the quiver beneath it. "Someone who wants to help," a smooth, calm voice replied. There was a strange warmth to it, the kind that seemed to disarm even the most cautious heart. Aisha hesitated. Memories of the shadows and the recent attack surged to the forefront. Standing there was a woman, elegantly dressed yet obviously practical, with eyes that held secrets and unspoken knowledge. "My name is Lena," the woman said, voice steady, but with an undertone of urgency. "I've been watching. I know what's happening, and I want to help." Aisha narrowed her eyes. "Why should I trust you?" Lena's gaze softened, almost sorrowful. "Because I have lost people to the shadows. I know their methods, their reach, and their intentions. You cannot fight them alone, and pretending you can will only put your child in danger." The words should have reassured Aisha, but a knot of suspicion formed in her stomach. The stranger from the park, the Alpha, the shadows, she had learned one truth over the past weeks. Trust was a dangerous commodity, a double-edged sword. "Come in," Aisha said cautiously, stepping aside. "But one wrong move, and you're gone." Lena nodded, entering the apartment as if she belonged there. The two women sat across from each other, the baby sleeping peacefully in Aisha's arms. The Alpha's teachings echoed in her mind. Observe, question, test. Hours passed in tense conversation, with Lena revealing fragmented truths about the shadows. Yet, each day, doubt gnawed at Aisha. Something about Lena's calm, composed demeanor felt rehearsed, controlled, calculated. One night, Aisha's instincts screamed louder than ever. She had awoken to the faintest whisper of movement near the crib. Her dagger in hand, she crept silently, and there she saw it. Lena, bending slightly, almost reverently, toward the baby. Aisha's breath caught, terror and betrayal colliding in her chest. What are you doing?" she demanded, voice trembling but fierce. Lena froze, eyes widening, then smiled faintly, a shadow of something unreadable. "Aisha, you don't understand," she whispered. "I'm only trying to protect him." "Protect him?" Aisha's voice broke, rage and fear swirling together. "I've trusted you. I've let you in my home, and you—" Lena took a step back, hands raised in surrender. I am on your side, but there are factions even I cannot fight alone. My loyalty is complicated. You must see the bigger picture. The shadows are closer than you think. Aisha's mind spun. Every word, every gesture was layered with ambiguity. Was Lena truly a friend? Or had she been manipulating her all along? Could she trust anyone? The Alpha had warned her about deception, about those who appeared helpful, yet carried hidden motives. That night, sleep eluded Aisha. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind against the window felt like a threat. And the baby, innocent and unaware, kicked gently, a silent reminder of what was at stake. By dawn, Aisha had made a decision. She would continue to keep Lena close, but only on her terms. Trust, she realized, was something she could grant only when certainty outweighed danger. And certainty was a luxury she could not afford. But just as she steeled herself, a knock came at the door. This time, it was not Lena. This time, it was someone she had never seen before, a figure cloaked in darkness, with a presence that made her blood run cold. You think you can protect him alone? The voice said, low, chilling, and familiar in a way that made her shiver. You are already too late. Aisha's hands tightened on the dagger, her heart racing, and for the first time in days, she understood the truth. In a world of shadows, allies could be enemies, and enemies could strike from the most unexpected places. Trust and betrayal were two sides of the same coin, and one wrong choice could cost her everything. The city had grown darker in Aisha's eyes, not in the literal sense, but in the way shadows moved just a little too deliberately, how conversations ended abruptly when she approached, how the world seemed to watch her with a quiet, predatory interest. The baby slept peacefully in her arms that morning, completely unaware of the storm closing in. But Aisha could feel it, the threads of a conspiracy tightening around her, the world bending toward a danger she had only. It started with whispers, quiet, almost inaudible conversations in the marketplace, fleeting glances between strangers, coded gestures she was only beginning to recognize. Then came the messages, encrypted emails, threatening notes left at her doorstep, and one chilling voicemail. The child will be ours, and you cannot stop what is coming. Fear surged through her, mingled with rage. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but she knew she could not. She would never run. Not from this, not from her child. The stranger who had first guided her, the one who had warned her of the shadows, returned that evening. He carried a folder heavy with secrets, and his expression was grim. This goes beyond anything you've encountered, he said. The shadows are not a single entity. They are a network, a conspiracy that spans cities, countries, even governments. They are patient, calculating, and ruthless. And they've targeted your child for reasons you cannot yet imagine. Aisha's hands trembled as she took the folder. Inside were photographs, reports, and documents linking powerful figures to criminal activities, all tied to the Shadows network. Names she had never heard, faces she would never forget, all converging on her and the child. The enormity of the situation threatened to crush her. They want him, the stranger continued, because he is more than a child. He represents power, influence, and the legacy of the Alpha. Whoever controls him controls a force that could shift everything. And they have been waiting for this moment for decades. Aisha's mind reeled. For weeks, she had been fighting threats she could not fully see. Now the scope of those threats became terrifyingly clear. The enemy was vast, invisible, and relentless. That night, as she fortified her apartment, she noticed subtle changes: tiny cameras, devices hidden in corners, wires that shouldn't have been there. Her pulse raced, adrenaline surging, but this time, her fear was tempered with preparation. She had learned from the alpha, from the stranger, from her own instincts. She could fight. She had to fight. But the conspiracy was clever, anticipating her every move. In the dead of night, her door unlocked itself with a silent click. She froze, every muscle coiled like a spring, dagger in hand, eyes scanning the dark apartment. And then she saw it, a figure cloaked and moving silently, stepping into the dim light. "You are becoming predictable," a voice said, low and chilling. "The child will be ours. You cannot protect him forever." Aisha's blood ran cold. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to breathe, to think. She had survived attacks before, deception before, but this felt different. The shadows were no longer a distant threat. They were inside, in her sanctuary, closer than ever. The confrontation was tense and terrifying. Every movement had to be precise, calculated. The intruder moved with experience, deadly skill. But Aisha's instincts, honed by weeks of training and terror, kept her a step ahead. She managed to disarm the figure temporarily, pressing her dagger against their chest, demanding answers. "Who sent you?" she demanded, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The figure smiled, chillingly calm. "You think we act alone? There are those above us, pulling strings, waiting for the right moment. You cannot stop what is coming, Mother of the Air." The words were a revelation, slicing through her like a knife. There was more at play than she had imagined. The conspiracy was not just about power, it was about domination, control, and centuries of secrets. Her child was a key piece in a game she barely understood, and the stakes were unimaginably high. Before she could act further, the figure escaped, disappearing into the night, leaving her trembling, shaken, and more determined than ever. She knew now that she could not rely on chance, luck, or even her own strength alone. The conspiracy was intelligent, ruthless, and patient. Every decision she made would have consequences. Every move had to be calculated. By dawn, Aisha had formulated a plan. She would gather information, uncover the threads of the conspiracy, and strike strategically. She could not afford to be reactive anymore. She had to be proactive. Allies would be chosen carefully, trust measured meticulously, and every shadow examined for danger. A child kicked gently in her arms, a reminder of what she fought for, the reason her heart still beat with courage amidst the fear. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I will not let them take you. I will not let anyone harm you. We will survive, together." And as the city awoke, unaware of the storm brewing in its shadows, Aisha prepared herself for the battle ahead. The conspiracy was vast, the danger immense, but she had something they could never break: her determination, her courage, and the love she held for the child who was more than just a baby. He was the future, and she was his protector. The dark conspiracy was only beginning to reveal its full scope, and Aisha knew that the coming days would test every limit of her strength, every ounce of her cunning, and every beat of her heart. But she was ready. She had no other choice. The shadows whispered, she listened, and she prepared. The city had become a maze of danger for Aisha, each street, alley, and shadow potentially hiding the predators she had been running from for weeks. Her apartment, once a fragile sanctuary, now felt like a fragile cage, fortified against invisible enemies, yet constantly threatened by their reach. But vigilance could only do so much. The shadows were clever, patient, and relentless. They did not rush. They observe, learn, and wait for the perfect opportunity. And Aisha soon realized that survival was no longer just about defense. It was about anticipating attacks, reading the unseen, and acting before they struck. It began with small incidents, almost innocuous on their own, but alarming when combined. A bag she left on the floor vanished for a moment, only to reappear with its contents slightly shifted. Her phone, once private, now showed signs of tampering. Even the grocery delivery seemed suspicious. Items replaced with strange messages written in faint ink on the packaging. One evening, as she returned from a discreet errand, she noticed the faintest scent of smoke in the hallway. Her pulse spiked instantly. She had smelled it before in her nightmares, an early warning, the signal that something was amiss. She crept forward, dagger in hand, senses straining for any sound. The hallway was empty, silent except for the distant hum of the city. But when she reached her apartment door, she noticed it. Slight scratches around the lock, subtle marks she had never seen before. Someone had been there. Someone had tried to breach her sanctuary while she was away. The first close call shook her to the core, but it also steeled her resolve. She reinforced her doors, installed hidden cameras, and mapped out every escape route. She could not remain passive. She had to anticipate the shadows' moves. Days later, another close call almost cost her everything. While stepping out to a local market, she felt a presence following her, a silent, deliberate pursuit that made her skin crawl. Every instinct screamed to flee, but she forced herself to stay calm, weaving through the crowded streets, using every tactic the Alpha had taught her. She ducked into narrow alleys, doubled back through shadowed passageways, and finally led her pursuer into a blind corner. Her dagger in hand, she spun to confront the figure, heart hammering, muscles coiled like springs. The man froze. His eyes gleamed with malice, but before he could strike, Aisha's careful planning paid off. A sudden honk, a thrown bottle, anything to startle and disrupt, gave her the edge to escape once again. She ran, lungs burning, heart racing, until the city streets swallowed her, and her pursuer was lost in the crowd. Even within her apartment, the danger was never gone. One night, while checking the baby's room, she noticed a faint reflection in the mirror. Someone had been watching, leaving a subtle mark on the glass, a silent warning. Aisha froze, heart pounding, every muscle ready for action. The dagger in her hand felt heavier with the weight of responsibility. In that moment, she realized the stakes had escalated far beyond her initial fears. Survival was no longer just about her. It was about the child, the heir, and the future that so many powerful forces desired to control. She had survived so far, but each close call brought her closer to a point of no return. And yet, amidst the fear and danger, she felt something else, an unshakable determination. Every narrow escape, every whispered threat, only made her resolve stronger. She was a mother, and she would not allow the shadows to claim her child. Not now, not ever. A night stretched on, silent except for the faint hum of the city. But Aisha knew better than to trust the quiet. The shadows were patient. They would strike again, smarter, faster, deadlier. And when they did, she had to be ready, not just to survive, but to fight back, to protect the future resting quietly in her arms. Every close call, every near miss was a lesson, a warning, and a challenge. And Aisha had learned one thing with absolute clarity. In a world full of danger, survival was only the beginning. The real battle, the battle for her child, for power, for justice, was still to come. And somewhere in the shadows, the conspirators waited, plotting, calculating, unaware that Aisha's resolve had grown stronger, sharper, and deadlier with every heartbeat. The city never slept, but Aisha's world had become a sleepless vigil. Every shadow, every flicker of movement, every distant sound became a signal, a warning that danger could strike at any moment. She had grown stronger, sharper, more vigilant than she had ever imagined possible. The lessons of the Alpha, the guidance of the stranger, and the perilous encounters with the shadows had honed her instincts to a razor's edge. But now the danger was no longer scattered. It had a purpose, a plan, a trap that had been set for her from the beginning. The conspiracy had orchestrated its moves with patience and precision, and Aisha knew that every warning, every attack, every whisper of fear was only leading her toward it, the final trap. It began with a message, subtle, encrypted, yet impossible to ignore. "We know where you are. The child is ours. Step into the light or vanish forever." The message chilled her, but it also sparked a fierce determination. She would not run. She would not hide. She would face them. She had survived too long, and too much was at stake. Every narrow escape had prepared her for this moment, and she would meet the danger head-on. The stranger from before appeared at dusk, his presence steady, reassuring, yet filled with tension. "They're expecting you," he said quietly. "One misstep, and it's over. But you have the advantage they don't expect. You know them, even if only a little, and you survived this long. That is strength in itself." Aisha nodded, clutching the baby tightly. Every instinct screamed caution, but a quiet fire burned within her. She would not allow the shadows, the conspirators, the enemies, whoever lurked in the darkness to take her child. Not today, not ever. The location was abandoned, a massive warehouse on the outskirts of the city, its rusted gates and broken windows a perfect facade for the darkness within. As Aisha approached, she sensed the careful orchestration of danger. The floorboards, the shadows, the faint hum of electricity, all designed to intimidate, disorient, and control. She moved silently, dagger in hand, instincts alert, eyes scanning every corner. And then she saw them, figures waiting, cloaked in darkness, their intentions clear. The shadows were numerous, disciplined, ready to strike. But Aisha was not alone. From the shadows, the Alpha appeared. His presence was commanding, terrifying, and protective all at once. Every step he took radiated power, and for the first time, Aisha realized that the stakes were far larger than she had imagined. They were fighting against forces that could alter destinies, manipulate power, and destroy lives with ruthless precision. The confrontation began silently. Movements were deliberate, shadows shifted, and the air was heavy with tension. The attackers were skilled, trained, deadly, but Aisha and the Alpha moved with purpose, a coordinated force that struck fear into their enemies. Dagger met steel, calculated kicks and strikes kept opponents at bay, and every shadowed corner was a potential battleground. Aisha's heart pounded, her breath sharp and steady, each motion a balance of instinct, courage, and desperation. The child she carried had awakened a power within her she did not fully understand. Hours passed in a tense blur. Each strike, each dodge, each near miss tested every limit of endurance and courage. The shadows had underestimated her, the mother's determination, the alpha's power, and the bond between them. Then, in a moment of chaotic intensity, the mastermind revealed himself. A tall, imposing figure, his face hidden in shadow, his presence radiating calculated menace. "You've survived longer than expected," he said, voice echoing through the warehouse. "But the child is mine. The Alpha cannot protect him forever." Aisha's hands tightened around her dagger, eyes narrowing. The Alpha stepped beside her, a wall of power and authority. "You've lost," he said, voice calm, deadly, resonating with control. "You underestimated her, and you will pay for every attempt to harm what is mine." The confrontation reached its climax with a calculated series of maneuvers, traps within traps, deception countered by instinct. The mastermind lunged, but the Alpha anticipated, countering with strength and precision that left the enemies disoriented. Aisha, guided by fear, instinct, and training, disarmed another, pinning him to the ground. Finally, with the mastermind cornered and all remaining shadows subdued, the danger was neutralized, but not without cost. The warehouse was scarred, walls shattered, evidence of the battle etched into every surface. Aisha's body ached, sweat mixed with tears, yet she held the child tightly, feeling the tiny heartbeat that had guided her through every danger. "You were magnificent," the Alpha said softly, eyes locked on hers. "You survived, you fought, and you protected him. That is strength most cannot comprehend." Aisha looked around the battered warehouse, the fallen enemies, the evidence of the conspiracy revealed. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, she allowed herself to breathe. The child stirred in her arms, and she whispered softly, almost reverently, "You're safe, for now, but we will survive, together." Outside, the city remained unaware of the storm it had almost hosted within its shadows. But Aisha knew the truth. Danger would always lurk, but so would her courage, her instincts, and the bond between mother, child, and Alpha. A final trap had been survived, but the game was far from over. The shadows had been defeated in body, but the network, the conspiracy, the web of deceit that had hunted her and her child for weeks was far from broken. The mastermind's influence stretched beyond the city, hidden in politics, business, and crime syndicates. Aisha and the Alpha retreated to a secure location, hidden from prying eyes. The Alpha, calm and calculating, observed the city from the shadows, tracking movements, intercepting messages, and slowly piecing together the network that threatened the child. Aisha, exhausted yet determined, began to see patterns emerge, gaps in the shadows' organization that could be exploited. "It's unraveling," the Alpha said one evening, voice low but firm. "Their communication lines are fractured. Their trust in each other is deteriorating. The longer we wait, the weaker they become. But we must act strategically. One wrong move now could undo everything." The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A hidden ledger recovered from a low-level operative revealed financial transactions, meeting schedules, and connections to high-ranking figures within the conspiracy. Each page sent shivers down her spine, showing how vast and entrenched the network had been. "We can bring them down," she whispered to the Alpha, awe and determination mingling in her voice. "We just need the right moment." He nodded, eyes dark with intensity. "Timing will be everything. They will try to flee, to regroup, to retaliate. We must strike decisively." Days turned into nights filled with surveillance, careful planning, and anticipation. Each minor victory, an intercepted message, a failed assassination attempt, a betrayal within their ranks, brought them closer to dismantling the network completely. But Aisha knew victory could never be taken for granted. Then, the final opportunity presented itself. A high-ranking conspirator, desperate after weeks of setbacks, arranged a meeting in a secluded location, thinking he could regroup and reclaim power. Aisha and the Alpha knew this was the perfect trap, but this time they intended to reverse it. The night was tense as they approached the location. Every shadow was scrutinized, every sound analyzed. The conspirator was there, flanked by loyal operatives, unaware that he was walking into a meticulously orchestrated net. The confrontation was electric, fraught with danger. The Alpha moved with lethal precision, neutralizing threats before they could act. Aisha, guided by instinct and training, intercepted attempts to harm the child, her dagger and quick thinking saving them multiple times. Finally, the mastermind himself emerged, cornered but defiant. "You cannot stop what is already in motion," he shouted, voice echoing in the silent night. Aisha stepped forward, voice steady despite adrenaline. "It's over. Your network is unraveling. Every lie, every threat, every act of violence, you will answer for it." Before he could retaliate, authorities, coordinated by the Alpha's careful planning and the evidence Aisha had helped recover, moved in, apprehending the remaining operatives. The conspiracy, once vast and untouchable, began to collapse under the weight of its exposure. As the mastermind was led away in handcuffs, the Alpha turned to Aisha, gaze intense, yet filled with unspoken pride. "You were fearless," he said softly. "You protected him, endured the trials, and survived. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Aisha's heart swelled with relief, exhaustion, and awe. The unraveling was complete, the network exposed, the mastermind captured, the child safe. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe, feeling the weight of survival lift from her shoulders. The city around them remained unaware of the invisible battle that had raged within its shadows. But Aisha knew the truth. Danger had passed, enemies had been exposed, and a fragile peace lay ahead. Yet she also understood that the world was vast, full of unseen threats. With the child safe in her arms, she whispered, "We survived, and nothing will ever take you from me." The Alpha stood beside her, silent and protective, their bond solidified through trials, danger, and shared purpose. The shadows had been confronted, the conspiracy unraveled, and hope glimmered in the darkness. Yet, even in triumph, a quiet understanding lingered. The world was vast, full of dangers both seen and unseen. Courage, love, and determination could light even the darkest path. And with the child safe, Aisha knew they were ready for whatever the future held. The air was heavy with anticipation as Aisha and the Alpha prepared for the final move. The mastermind, architect of the Shadow's vast conspiracy, had been cornered, but true justice still awaited. Every step now had to be calculated, precise, and decisive. The location was an abandoned, secluded estate far from the city's prying eyes, surrounded by darkness and silence. It had been chosen carefully, a controlled environment where the mastermind's options would be limited and escape impossible. Surveillance was complete, reinforcements hidden nearby, every precaution taken. The mastermind arrived, flanked by his last loyal operatives, his expression a mask of arrogance and desperation. "Do you think you can end this?" he sneered. You cannot destroy what has been built for decades. The child, the alpha, none of it matters. You are too late. Aisha's eyes narrowed, fire igniting within her. It matters to me, she said, voice unwavering. It matters to him. She lifted the child, the baby's serene face a stark contrast to the tension surrounding them. It ends tonight. Justice will be served. The confrontation began with calculated precision. The Alpha neutralized operatives with skill and speed, his movements a blur of lethal force. Aisha, guided by instinct and training, protected the child, disarming and incapacitating anyone who came near. Every strike, every block, every step was a careful measure of survival. The mastermind attempted to flee, desperate and cornered, but the Alpha anticipated every movement. There is nowhere left to run, he said, voice carrying inevitability. Justice is not a threat, it is a certainty. In a final moment, Aisha's dagger met his, forcing him to stumble, and the Alpha moved in, subduing him completely. Authorities arrived, led by evidence meticulously gathered by Aisha and coordinated by the Alpha. The mastermind and his operatives were taken into custody. The network that had threatened her child for months, the conspiracy that had infiltrated every shadow, was dismantled. The city, unaware of the invisible war, would never know how close it came to losing its future. Aisha sank to her knees, cradling the child against her chest, tears of relief and exhaustion streaming down her face. She whispered, "We survived. Nothing will ever take you from me." The Alpha stood beside her, silent and protective, their bond forged in fire, ready for whatever lay ahead.